up what happened in Ohio, right? I was going to talk about it another day, but Ohio had a train crash, and we're going to learn about this together because I didn't get a chance to pull up stuff, which is why I was going to look at it, right? I was going to look at it and stream it another day, but we got some time here, so let's go ahead and do it, right? So uh, this happened in Ohio. A 150 car Norfolk Southern Norfolk. That's a hard word to say. I never realized how hard it was to say. A 150 car Norfolk Southern freight train carrying hazardous chemicals and other material derailed in the town of East Palestine, Ohio on February 3rd, forcing hundreds of people to evacuate the town for several days as the company vented and burned carcinogenic chemicals from cars involved in the fiery crash. The EPA on February 12th said it had not detected levels of concern of hazardous substances released during or after the crash, though it said it was continuing to monitor the air throughout East Palestine, including inside at least 210 homes. The EPA said it was also investigating soil and surface water contamination near the crash site and had collected spilled material in a nearby stream. It has said Norfolk Southern, I said it that time, it said Norfolk Southern had installed a dam and water bypass system in the stream to prevent contamination of downstream waters, though it did not say where they were when they were installed. In a letter sent to the company on February 10th, the EPA said substances released during the incident were observed and detected in samples from Sulphur Run, Leslie Run, Bull Creek, Norfolk Creek, Norfolk, Little Beaver Creek, and the Ohio River, and were also observed entering storm drains. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources officials told WEWS TV that it estimates the crash as of February 8th has resulted in the deaths of 3,500 fish, approximately 7.5 miles in streams. 7 streams south of the town, though it is working with the Ohio EPA and a company hired by Norfolk Southern to determine how many fish have been killed. So far, at least 4 class action lawsuits have been filed. Train was pulling 5 tankers containing vinyl chloride, a colorless but hazardous gas used to produce PVC, plastic, and vinyl parts. Said the Norfolk Southern cars carrying vinyl chloride were not breached during the crash, but were at risk of exploding, so crews released and burned their contents February 6th, creating a massive smoke plume. Acute exposure to high levels of vinyl chloride, a classified human carcinogen in the air, has been linked to several nervous system effects, while chronic exposure has been shown to cause liver damage. When vinyl chloride burns, it decomposes into hydrogen chloride and phosgene, according to the International Program of Chemical Safety. Phosgene is highly poisonous and was used extensively during World War I as a choking agent, while hydrogen chloride is irritating and corrosive to any tissue with which it comes into contact. So that's not good. Security footage captured in Salem before the derailment shows sparks or flames under at least one of the cars on the train, which was transporting goods from Madison, Illinois to Conway, Pennsylvania. 2 days after the company vented and burned the vinyl chloride, East Palestine residents who evacuated were allowed to return to their homes but have complained of smells, headaches, nausea, and other ailments. Yeah, that's probably going to be like that for a while. In the list, Norfolk Southern said the cars carrying the butyl acrylate and ethyl hexyl acrylates were breached and either all or some of the chemicals were released during the crash. It labeled the status of the car carrying ethyl glycol monobutyl as ether as unknown, while it said isobutylene car was burned but not breached. A spokesperson for Norfolk Southern did not directly respond to Axios questions. Okay, so the train crashed, and when it crashed, it had a bunch of chemicals on board. And those chemicals now have to go somewhere, and they have to be cleaned up responsibly, and they have to be tracked throughout the environment, right? And not all of them are dangerous to humans. Not all of them are bad. But it had some pretty nasty things in there. And some of it is just they don't have a choice because of the nature of the accident, but to release it, right? Because, it's bad to burn chemicals that could potentially cause problems in the air. It's worse if you set off a chemical bomb, right? And an explosion of a tanker full of hazardous chemicals is a chemical bomb. That's worse than a controlled burn. So it's sort of like a you know, the pick which devil you want kind of deal. And it's all I know is it's probably not going to be good there. But in the past, we've seen severely contaminated areas recover pretty quickly. It really depends on how the watershed works, and if me being from the Cleveland area, this happened basically in my backyard. Um, the watershed is pretty robust in the northern part of Ohio, so I would imagine the chemicals that get into the water system wouldn't stick around for very long. They'd get diluted pretty quickly. But it's still going to be an issue, like definitely short term. So we'll see how long term goes. And, the EPA tends to be fairly trustworthy with these things because they're responsible for keeping all of us workers good, little, healthy workers, right? At least to a certain extent. So the EPA is pretty good about preventing acute environmental problems. They're usually good about it. Long term stuff, you get a little bit of mixed results because, if you get cancer 3 weeks from now, that's a real problem because a lot of people could die from something that'll give you cancer in 3 weeks. But if you get cancer 50 years from now, well, you're retired. You're no longer a good little worker in the workforce, and the EPA doesn't care as much, right? So, short term stuff, you can pretty much trust what the EPA says because that's their job is to keep us all short term safe from environmental hazards. We figured out that, back in the late 60s and the 70s and such, that not taking care of the environment creates more problems for our capitalist overlords than taking care of the environment does. And so now the EPA forces them to take care of the environment. And as such, don't listen to what the news sites say. You know what I'm saying? Unless they're fairly reputable. NPR is pretty good. Axios doesn't do a bad job. BBC's not terrible, right? Any news site that operates mostly nonprofit, right? But especially like Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, they're all going to have some kind of angle to it that might not be trustworthy. So if you're looking for good information, go straight to the EPA or go to a nonprofit news source and keep track of what's going on because this is such a bad thing, a bad chemical spill that happened in Ohio, that there very likely will be some EPA rule changes from this, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it. But I hope everybody in the town can go back to their homes, and I hope everybody there is safe.